Chapter 5. Cambridge. Stephen got a very good degree from the University of Oxford, and he decided to go to the University of Cambridge next. Cambridge was famous for science, and it was possible to study astronomy or cosmology there. In astronomy, scientists study the stars and the universe. In cosmology, scientists ask the question, how did the universe begin? To study cosmology, you needed to be very good at both astronomy and physics. At school in St. Albans, Stephen talked about cosmology with his friends. Now it interested him more than astronomy, and he wanted to do research into it. He said, "If you understand how the universe works, you begin to control it." But Stephen found that his studies at the University of Cambridge were more difficult than at Oxford. He did not need to work very hard at Oxford. He thought that he only worked for 1,000 hours in 3 years there. At Cambridge, the maths was much more difficult. Stephen was also having other problems. He was falling over a lot now, and he was more worried about it than before. Then, one day in winter, he fell over again, and this time he could not get up at all. His mother was very worried too, and she took him to see a doctor. Stephen was 21 now, and the doctor thought that there was a real problem. He sent Stephen to hospital. Stephen stayed in hospital for 2 weeks. The doctors studied him closely, and at the end, the news was bad. "You're going to get worse, not better," they told him. "We're sorry, but we don't know why, and we can't do anything to help you." After a few weeks of research, the doctors discovered more about Stephen's problem. "You have motor neurone disease," they said. We use muscles to move and to speak, and motor neurons control these muscles. If you have motor neurone disease, MND, the motor neurons slowly stop working, and the muscles do not work anymore. They get weaker and weaker. Our mind controls many of our muscles, but the disease stops these muscles working. Doctors understand some things about the disease, but they cannot stop it. Usually, people with MND do not live very long. Doctors sometimes call motor neurone disease Lou Gehrig's disease. Lou Gehrig was a very famous American baseball player. He died of MND in 1941. He was only 37 years old. The doctors told Stephen, "You're very ill, and we think you will only live for a few more years. The best thing to do is to keep working at your university studies." Stephen tried to work, but at first it was very difficult, and he was very unhappy for a time. But after some weeks, Stephen decided he did not want the disease to win. He started to work hard again. He said, "Before I knew that I had motor neurone disease, I was beginning to get very bored. When I knew that I had it, there were a lot of things I wanted to do. MND made it hard for Stephen to work. Soon it was very difficult to write. So he started to talk to other students and ask them to write things down for him. Other scientists thought that his work on maths and physics was very good and started to talk about it. Many people thought that his ideas were very new and interesting. Stephen was now working harder on cosmology than before. But other things in his life became important too. He was now in love. In 1962, he met a woman called Jane Wilde at a friend's party. Now he thought, I don't have long to live. I must use that time as well as possible. Stephen and Jane married in 1965 in St Albans. In 1966, the University of Cambridge gave Stephen a research job, and he could now do more research into cosmology. With his new job, he had more money, so he and Jane found a home in Cambridge. At that time, Stephen could still walk, but it was not easy. Jane was studying in London, and she only came to Cambridge for the weekends. Later, she came to live in Cambridge with Stephen. In the next 5 years, Stephen and Jane had 2 children, Robert and Lucy. At this time, the family also travelled to and across the United States of America for Stephen's work. All this travel sometimes made things very difficult for Jane. She had 2 young children, but Stephen needed a lot of help too. She was often very tired, and usually she was very worried about Stephen. But because Jane did all the work for the family, Stephen had more time to think about some very big questions. At this time, Stephen was thinking about the biggest question in cosmology. When did the universe begin? Or has it always been here? Stephen and his friends were working on one idea. The universe started suddenly, and this time was called the Big Bang. But some other scientists did not think like Stephen. For them, the universe did not start at a special time. It was an exciting time in cosmology. Stephen was thinking a lot about the Big Bang, but he soon understood that there was another thing he needed to look at first: black holes. Black holes are very strange places in the universe. A black hole is a dead star, and everything in it is very close together. Black holes are very, very heavy, and the gravity is very strong. The gravity in a black hole is so strong that even light cannot travel away from a black hole. You cannot see a black hole, but it is still there. Black holes were not a new idea. A man called John Michell had the idea of dark stars in 1783. But 200 years later, nobody really understood the physics of black holes. John Michell had the idea of dark stars. Stephen could not write his ideas down himself, but he could still think. he started to look at some very difficult maths problems about black holes in his head. Maybe not being able to write helped him to have his great ideas. Maybe he thought better in his mind than on paper. One of Stephen's ideas was that something came out of black holes. It was called radiation. Later, it was called Hawking radiation. If you can find the radiation, then you can find the black hole. But Hawking radiation is not easy to find, and scientists are still looking for it. Stephen's work on the maths of black holes helped him to look at the bigger problem, the Big Bang. Maybe maths could show that there was a Big Bang somewhere in the past. The idea of the Big Bang is that the universe began with one very small, very heavy thing at its center. The thing was very hot, and it got bigger and bigger very quickly. The universe is still getting bigger today. With maths, scientists can now say that this Big Bang happened 13.8 billion years ago. Stephen's work on black holes, and then his work on the Big Bang, made him famous across the world.